Hello, fifth graders. I just realized that I don't have an extra book to prop up for our focal point when I'm reading, but this will help you know when you get to Google Classroom that, that this is another reading of Anne Frank, The Diary of a Young Girl. This is the reading for Tuesday, next Tuesday, okay? I've already put in one for Monday of our first week, and this is Tuesday. And if I have marked it right, we're on page 16, Thursday, the 9th of July, 1942. Dear Kitty, and remember Kitty is what she calls her diary. It's kind of like a friend, so she named it Kitty instead of just diary. Dear Kitty, so we walked in the pouring rain, Daddy, Mommy, and I, each with a school satchel and shopping bag filled to the brim with all kinds of things thrown together anyhow. We got sympathetic looks from people on their way to work. You could see by their faces how sorry they were. They wouldn't be able to offer us a lift. The gaudy yellow star spoke for itself. Remember, during this time, the Jewish people had to wear a 6-point yellow star on their arm, on top of their clothing. Only when we were on the road did Mommy and Daddy begin to tell me bits and pieces about the plan. For months, as many of our goods and chattels and necessities of life as possible had been sent away, and they were sufficiently ready for us to have gone into hiding of our own accord on July 16th. The plan had to be speeded up 10 days because of the call-up, so our quarters would not be well organized, but we had to make the best of it. The hiding place itself would be in the building where Daddy has his office. It would be hard for outsiders to understand, but I shall explain that later on. Daddy didn't have many people working for him. Mr. Krahler, Kufus, Neep, and Ellie Vossen, a 23-year-old typist who all knew of our arrival. Mr. Vossen, Ellie's father, and 2 boys worked in the warehouse. They had not been told. I will describe the building. There is a large warehouse on the ground floor which is used as a store. The front door to the house is next to the warehouse door, and inside the front door is a second doorway which leads to a staircase, A. And if you'll look in your book on the next page, on page 17, it has a map showing you all this. So take a few minutes and look at that as she describes it. There is another door at the top of the stairs with a frosted glass window in it, which has office written in black letters across it. That is the large main office, very big, very light, and very full. Ellie, Neep, and Mr. Kufus work there in the daytime. A small dark room containing a safe, a wardrobe, and a large cupboard leads to a small, somewhat dark second office. Mr. Krahler and Mr. Van Dan used to sit here. Now it is only Mr. Krahler. One can reach Krahler's office from the passage, but only via a glass door which can be opened from the inside, but not easily from the outside. From Krahler's office, a long passage goes past the coal store, up 4 steps, and leads to the showroom of the whole building. The private office, dark, dignified furniture, linoleum and carpets on the floor, radio, smart lamp, everything first class. Next door, there is a roomy kitchen with a hot water faucet and a gas stove. Next door, the WC. And that stands, they used the WC for, I think they called it the water closet during that time, and that would mean like their restroom, okay? A wooden staircase leads from the downstairs passage to the next floor, B. You go back and look at your floor plan that she drew. There's a small landing at the top. There's a door at each end of the building, the left one leading to a storeroom at the top, at the front of the house, and to the attics. One of those really steep Dutch staircases runs from the side of the other door opening onto the street. The right-hand door leads to our secret annex. No one would ever guess that there would be so many rooms hidden behind that plain gray door. There's a little step in front of the door, and then you are outside. There's a steep staircase immediately opposite the entrance, E. On the left, a tiny passage brings you into a room which was to become the Frank family's bed-sitting room. Next door was a smaller room, study, and bedroom for the 2 young ladies of the family. On the right, a little room without windows containing the wash basin and a small WC compartment with another door leading to Margaret's and my room. If you go up the next flight of stairs and open the door, you are simply amazed that there could be such a big, light room in such an old house by the canal. And remember, a canal is a waterway. There is a gas stove in this room, thanks to the fact that it was used as a laboratory and a sink. This is now the kitchen for the Van Daan couple, besides being general living room, dining room, and scullery. A tiny corridor room will become Peter Van Daan's apartment. Then just as on the lower landing, there is a large attic. So there you are. I've introduced you to the whole of our beautiful secret annex. Yours, Annie. Page 19, Friday, July 10th, 1942. Dear Kitty, I expect I have thoroughly bored you with my long-winded descriptions of our dwelling, but still I think you should know where we've landed. But to continue my story, you see, I've not finished yet. When we arrived at the Prinsengracht, Miep took us quickly upstairs and into the secret annex. She closed the door behind us and we were alone. Margaret was already waiting for us, having come much faster on her bicycle. Our living room and all the other rooms were chock full of rubbish, indescribably so. All the cardboard boxes which had been sent to the office in the previous months lay piled on the floor and the beds. The little room was filled to the ceiling with bedclothes. We had to start clearing up immediately if we wished to sleep in decent beds that night. Mummy and Margaret were not in a fit state to take part. They retired and lay down on their beds. They were miserable and lots more before. But the two cleaner-ups of the family, Daddy and myself, wanted to start at once. The whole day long we unpacked boxes, filled cupboards, hammered and tidied until we were dead beat. We sank into clean beds that night. We hadn't had a bit of anything warm the whole day, but we didn't care. Mummy and Margaret were too tired and keyed up to eat, and Daddy and I were too busy. On Tuesday morning, we went on where we left off the day before. Ellie and Miep collected our rations for us. I believe. Daddy improved the poor blackout. We scrubbed the kitchen floor and were on the go the whole day before long. I hardly had time to think about the great change in my life until Wednesday. Then I had a chance for the first time since our arrival to tell you about it, and at the same time to realize myself what had actually happened to me and what was still going to happen. Yours, Annie. Saturday, July 11th, 1942, and we're on page 20 now. Dear Kitty, Mommy, Daddy, Mummy, and Margaret can't get used to the sound of the Westertoren clock yet, which tells us the time every quarter of an hour. I can. I loved it from the start, and especially in the night. It's like a faithful friend. I expect you will be interested to hear what it feels like to disappear. Well, all I can say is that I don't know myself yet. I don't think I shall ever feel really at home in this house, but that does not mean that I loathe it here. Loathe means you dislike something very strongly. It is more like being on vacation in a very peculiar boarding house. Rather a mad idea, perhaps, but that is how it strikes me. The secret annex is an ideal hiding place. Although it leans to one side and is damp, you'd never find such a comfortable hiding place anywhere in Amsterdam. No, perhaps not even in the whole of Holland. Our little room looks very bare at first, with nothing on the walls, but thanks to Daddy, who had brought my film star collection and picture postcard on beforehand, and with the aid of paste pot and glue, I have transformed the walls into one gigantic picture. This makes it look much more cheerful, and when the Van Daans come, we'll get some wood from the attic and make a few little cupboards for the walls and other odds and ends to make it look more lively. Margot and Mummy are a little better now. Mummy felt well enough to cook some soup for the first time yesterday, but then forgot all about it while she was downstairs talking. So the peas were burned to a cinder and utterly refused to leave the pan. Mr. Kufus has brought me a book called Young People's Annual. The four of us went to the private office yesterday evening and turned on the radio. I was so terribly frightened that someone might hear it that I simply begged Daddy to come upstairs with me too. Mummy understood how I felt and came too. We are very nervous in other ways, too, that the neighbors might hear us or see something going on. We made curtains straight away on the first day. Really, one can hardly call them curtains. They are just light, loose strips of material, all different shapes, quality, and pattern, which Daddy and I sewed together in a most unprofessional way. These works of art are fixed in position with drawing pins, not to come down until we emerge from here. There are some large business premises on the right of us, and on the left a furniture workshop. There is no one there after working hours, but even so, sounds could travel through the walls. We have forbidden Margot to cough at night, although she has a bad cold, and we make her swallow large doses of codeine. I am looking for Tuesday when the Van Dans arrive. It will be much more fun and not so quiet. In the silence that frightens me so in the evenings and at night, I wish like anything that one of our protectors could sleep here at night. I wish like I can't tell you how oppressive it is never to be able to go outdoors, so I'm very afraid that we shall be discovered and be shot. That is not exactly a pleasant prospect. We have to whisper and tread lightly during the day, otherwise the people in the warehouse might hear us. Someone is calling me. Yours, Annie. So you can see so far from what we've read that they had to go into hiding because of they were Jewish people, and Hitler wanted to take them and either kill them or put them in what was called concentration camps, which I'm sure we'll read more about later. So they went into the top of this building that you have a floor plan for, and they're in hiding, but during the day there's people who work in that building. So during the day they have to be very quiet so no one will hear that they're there. Can you imagine how hard that would be to be quiet like that every day and not be able to go outside? So even though we're having to stay home and not be at school, we still have a lot of freedom, don't we? And we certainly need to be thankful because we're not fearing for our lives. We're just being careful so people won't get sick. All right, let's start a new section. It's page 22, Friday, August the 14th, 1942. Dear Kitty, I have deserted you for a whole month, so she didn't write anything in her diary for a whole month. But honestly, there is so little news here that I can't find amusing things to tell you every day. The Van Dans arrived on July 13th. We thought they were coming on the 14th, but between the 13th and 16th of July, the Germans called up people right and left, which created more and more unrest. So they played for safety, better a day too early than a day too late. At 9:30 in the morning, we were still having breakfast. Peter arrived, the Van Dans' son, not 16 yet, a rather soft, shy, gawky youth. Can't expect much from his company. He brought his cat, Moochie, with him. Mr. and Mrs. Van Daan arrived half an hour later, and to our great amusement, she had a large potty in her hat box. I don't feel at home anywhere without my chamber, she declared. So that was the first thing that had to find its permanent resting place under her divan. And a divan would be like a sofa. So she brought a large potty in a large hat box. And she called it her chamber. And a lot of people called things like that a chamber pot. And that's where you went to the restroom when you couldn't get to a restroom before people had indoor plumbing. And I'm thinking maybe they had plumbing in this place, but maybe there weren't enough toilets for everyone. You know, it's a lot of things are different when you're, hiding for your life. You wouldn't have all the comforts that you have in your regular life. Mr. Van Daan did not bring his, but carried a folding tea table under his arm. From the day they arrived, we all had meals cozily together, and after 3 days, it was just as if we were one large family. Naturally, the Van Dans were able to tell us a lot about the extra week they had spent in the inhabited world. Among other things, we were very interested to hear what had happened to our house and to Mr. Goodsmith. Mr. Van Daan told us, Mr. Goodsmith phoned at 9 o'clock on Monday morning and asked if I could come around. I went immediately and found him in a state of great agitation. He let me read a letter that the Franks had left behind and wanted to take the cat to the neighbors as indicated in the letter, which pleased me. Mr. G was afraid that the house would be searched, so we went through all the rooms, tidied up a bit, and cleared away the breakfast things. Suddenly I discovered a writing pad on Mrs. Frank's desk with an address and Maastricht written on it. Although I knew that this was done on purpose, I pretended to be very surprised and shocked and urged Mr. G to tear up this unfortunate little piece of paper without delay. I went on pretending that I knew nothing of your disappearance all the time, but after seeing the paper, I got a brainwave. Mr. Grubschnitt, I said, it suddenly dawns on me what this address may refer to. Now it all comes back to me. A high-ranking officer was in the office about 6 months ago. He appeared to be very friendly with Mr. Frank and offered to help him should the need arise. He was stationed in Maastricht. I think he must have kept his word and somehow or another managed to get them into Belgium and then on to Switzerland. I should tell this to any friends who may inquire. Don't, of course, mention Maastricht. With these words, I left the house. Most of your friends already know because I've been told myself several times by different people. We were highly amused at the story, and when Mr. Van Daan gave us further details, laughed still more at the very way people can let their imagination run away with them. One family had seen a pair of us pass on bicycles very early in the morning, and another lady knew quite definitely that we were fetched by a military car in the middle of the night. So when the Van Daans left a week later than the Franks, a neighbor had seen the things they left and went through the house with Mr. Van Daan. And Mr. Van Daan went ahead with like the ruse or the story they used to make people think that the Franks were somewhere else other than where they are. And then, as it said in the book, neighbors started saying, well, I saw this, well, I saw that, and it's not really what anyone saw, but people let their imagination get carried away. It's kind of like when someone says something about someone maybe in our classroom or something, and then before you know it, it's all blown out of proportion. Okay, Friday, 21st of August, 1942. Dear Kitty, the entrance of our hiding place has now been properly concealed. Mr. Krahler thought it would be better to put a cupboard in front of our door because a lot of houses are being searched for hidden bicycles. But of course, it had to be a movable cupboard that can open like a door. Mr. Vonson made the whole thing. We had already let him into the secret and he couldn't do enough to help. If we want to go downstairs, we have to first bend down and then jump because the step has gone. The first 3 days, we were all going about with masses of lumps on our foreheads because we all knocked ourselves on the low doorway. Now we have nailed a cloth filled with wool against the top of the door. Let's see if that helps. I'm not working much at present. I'm giving myself holidays until September. Then Daddy is going to give me lessons. It's shocking how much I've forgotten already. There's little change in our life here. Mr. Van Daan and I usually manage to upset each other. It's just the opposite with Margaret, whom he likes very much. Mummy sometimes treats me like a baby, which I can't bear. Otherwise, things are going better. I still don't like Peter anymore. He is so boring. He flops lazily on his bed half the time, does a bit of carpentry, and then goes back for another snooze. What a fool. It is lovely weather, and in spite of everything, we make the most we can of it by lying on a camp bed in the attic where the sun shines through an open window. Yours, Annie. Wednesday, the 2nd of September, 1942. Dear Kitty, Mr. and Mrs. Van Daan have had a terrific quarrel. I've never seen anything like it before. Mummy and Daddy would never dream of shouting at each other. The cause was so trivial that the whole thing was a pure waste of breath, but still, everyone to his own liking. Naturally, it is very unpleasant for Peter, who has to stand by. No one takes him seriously. He's so frightfully touchy and lazy. Yesterday, he was badly upset because he found that his tongue was blue instead of red. This unusual phenomenon of nature disappeared just as quickly as it had come. Today, he is going about with a scarf on, as he has a stiff neck. In addition, my lord, and that's what she's calling him, kind of making fun of him. She's putting it in quotation marks, like he thinks he's really something. So she says, in addition, my lord complains of lumbago, and that's like, I think your back hurting. Pains around the heart, kidneys, and lungs are not unusual either. He is a real hypochondria. That's the word for such people, isn't it? And if you don't know that, someone who's a hypochondria is someone who finds reasons and thinks there's something wrong with them all the time. It is not all honey between Mummy and Mrs. Van Dan. There is plenty of cause for unpleasantness. To give a small example, I will tell you that Mrs. Van Dan has taken all 3 of her sheets out of the common linen cupboard. She takes it for granted that Mummy's sheets will do for all of us. It will be a nasty surprise for her when she finds that Mummy has followed her good example. Although she is thoroughly piqued, I believe is how you say that, piqued, she's aggravated that her dinner service and not ours is in use. She is always trying to find out where we have actually put our plates. They are closer than she thinks. They are in a cardboard box behind a lot of junk in the attic. Our plates are ungettable as long as we are here, and a good thing too. I always have bad luck. I smashed one of Mrs. Van Don's soup plates into 1,000 pieces yesterday. Oh, she cried angrily. Couldn't you be careful for once? That's the last one I've got. Mr. Van Don is all sugar to me nowadays. Long may it last. Mummy gave me another frightful sermon this morning. I can't bear them. Our ideas are completely opposite. Daddy is a darling, although he can sometimes be pretty angry with me for 5 minutes on end. Last week, we had a little interruption in our monotonous life. It was over a book about women and Peter. First, I must tell you that Margot and Peter are allowed to read nearly all the books that Mr. Kufus lends us, but the grown-ups held back on this particular book on the subject of women. Peter's curiosity was aroused at once. What was it that the 2 were not allowed to read in the book? He got hold of the book on the sly while his mother was downstairs talking and disappeared with his booty to the attic. Now, they're not meaning his booty, his bottom, but the book that he got. All went well for a few days. His mother knew what he was doing, but didn't tell tales until Father found out. He was very angry, took the book away, and thought that would finish the whole business. However, he had not allowed for his son's curiosity, which waxed rather than waned. That means it grew rather than diminished, because of his father's attitude. Peter, determined to finish it, thought of a way to get a hold of this enthralling book. In the meantime, Mrs. Van Don had asked Mummy what she thought about it all. Mummy thought this particular book was not suitable for Margaret, but she saw no harm in letting her read most parts. There is a great difference, Mrs. Van Don, said Mummy, between Margaret and Peter. In the first place, Margaret is a girl, and girls are always more grown up than boys. Secondly, Margaret has read quite a lot of serious books and does not go in search of things that are forbidden her. And thirdly, Margaret is far more developed and intelligent, shown by the fact of her being in the 4th form at school. That would be like a grade, okay? Mrs. Van Dan agreed, but still thought it was wrong in principle to let children read books which were written for grown-ups. In the meantime, Peter had found a time of the day when no one bothered about him or the book, 7:30 in the evening, when everyone was in the private office listening to the radio. That was when he took his treasure to the attic again. He should have been downstairs again by 8:30, but because the book was so thrilling, he forgot the time and was just coming downstairs as his father came into the room. You could imagine the consequences. With a slap and a snatch, the book lay on the table, and Peter was in the attic. That's how matters stood as we sat down to table. Peter stayed upstairs. No one bothered about him, and he had to go to bed without any supper. We went on with the meal, chattering gaily, when suddenly we heard a piercing whistle. We all stopped eating. Think about how much that must have scared them when they're in hiding. So we all stopped eating and looked with pale, changed faces from one to another. Then we heard Peter's voice calling down the chimney. I say, I'm not coming down anyway. Mr. Van Don sprang to his feet. His napkin fell to the floor, and scarlet in the face, he shouted, I've had enough of this. Daddy took his arm, afraid of what might happen, and the 2 men went together to the attic. After a great deal of resistance and stamping, Peter landed up in his room with the door closed, and we went on eating. Mrs. Van Dan wanted to save 1 slice of bread for the dear boy, but his father stood firm. If he doesn't apologize soon, he will have to sleep in the attic. Loud protests from the rest of us, as we thought missing supper was quite enough punishment. Besides, Peter might catch cold, and we couldn't call a doctor. Peter did not apologize. He was already in the attic. Mr. Van Don did nothing more about it, but I noticed next morning that Peter's bed had been slept in. Peter was back in the attic at 7 o'clock, but Daddy managed with a few friendly words to persuade him to come down again. Sour faces and obstinate silences for 3 days, and then everything went smoothly once more. Yours, Annie. So what we've just read kind of tells you about what it would be like for two families to be living in close quarters. You know, two families that weren't relatives or even maybe good friends. And, you know, that each family knows the other family's business. Like if the mom and dad had a big shouting quarrel, then, you know, other people would hear it. And if the son was doing things he wasn't supposed to do, then both families would know about it. So it would be very difficult to be in hiding, first of all, and you couldn't go outside, and you couldn't do as you pleased during the day, but then it would also be very difficult to have another family with you. Okay, I'm going to read a couple of more entries. Monday, the 21st of September, 1942. Dear Kitty, today I'm going to tell you our general news. Mrs. Van Don is unbearable. I get nothing but blow-ups from her for my continuous chatter. She is always pestering us in some way or another. This is the latest. She doesn't want to wash up the pans if there's a fragment left, instead of putting it into a glass dish. As we've always done until now, she leaves it in the pan to go bad. After the next meal, Margaret sometimes has about 7 pans to wash up, and then Madame says, well, Margaret, have you got a lot to do? You have got a lot to do. I'm busy with Daddy working out his family tree as we go along. He tells me little bits about everyone. It's terribly interesting. Mr. Kufas brings a few special books for me every other week. I'm thrilled with the Juk die Heul series. Of course, it's in German, so we don't know what those words are. I've enjoyed the whole of Sissy van Marksveld very much, and I've read Een Zomersaufit 4 times, and I still laugh about some of the ludicrous situations that arise. I mean, like crazy situations. Term time has begun, so that means her semester for school has begun. I'm working hard at my French and managed to